televised games. Football's back. First matchup for the day is UNLV taking on Idaho State, 1 p.m. Pacific time. Dan Mullen entering his first season. High expectations, a lot of turnover for the Rebels. Taking on an Idaho State team that's projected to finish 7th in the Big Sky Conference. Starting quarterback expected to be Jordan Cook, who lost his job last year to a transfer. Had a red shirt. Will get the start this year. Plenty of unknowns about UNLV. Well, the only thing we know is that their star running back Jaden Thomas is expected to be their horse this season. They're gonna have a QB battle. Anthony Calandra and Alex Orje gonna share snaps this game and probably the first couple of games to determine who's gonna be their guy for the rest of the season. Idaho State coach Cody Hawkins has an 8-15 record entering his third year. They're a team that's seen some beatings last year. They opened their season against Oregon State, lost by 30 points. UNLV enters 24-point favorites. Are they 4 touchdown favorites right now? Should we expect that from the Rebels? Yes, but anything can happen. Week 0. This was a game that was supposed to be played on September 13th, but was rescheduled for the mega fight, Canelo Alvarez against Terrence Crawford. So they find themselves playing Week 0 a week earlier, start the season off. A lot of eyes on them. There's only 6-7 matchups today. What can we expect from UNLV? Looking at the game notes, not much is known about Idaho State. What we should expect? Projected to finish 7th in the Big Sky. That we shouldn't expect much, but there could be surprises. Looking at their roster, a lot of their guys coming from other FBS schools, Utah State, Boise State, UTEP. So, they do have some talent of some degree on their team. Nothing comparable to what UNLV's bringing in. They got some roster weight comparisons. They got defensive backs, 3,600 pounds, roughly the weight of 75 medium pepperoni pizzas. Quarterbacks, 1,200 pounds, about the same as 3 vending machines. Running backs, roughly a double scoop ice cream truck, 1,400 pounds. Whatever that means. Is it going to help them come Saturday? I don't think so. But looking at UNLV, we expect them, to be run heavy. But of course, they're going to try and figure out which quarterback is their guy. So we could expect them to air it out. They got JoJo Earl coming over from TCU. That's all, some time there. What we should expect from this matchup, it should be a blowout. I think if Dan Mullen wants to make a statement and prove that UNLV's ready to take on Boise State yet again and get back to the Mountain West title game and maybe play spoilers to some degree, possibly playoffs. It starts on Saturday, and you have to be impressive with your new roster. Are they 24.5 point favorites right now? They should be. They should make it close. This should be a game that's over at halftime. They should be putting up 4 or 5 touchdown lead at half. Make a statement. No matter who the quarterback is, switch them out at each quarter and really just have their way with Idaho State. Prove not only to the nation but to the rest of the conference that UNLV is the team to beat, and they can compete with anybody. Looking at the game notes for UNLV. UNLV has a current record at Allegiant Stadium, 14-14. Not really indicative of how good they've been the last couple of seasons and what their potential really can be going forward. This is a program that's built itself up the past couple of years with Coach Arroyo and then Barry Odom, and now with Dan Mullen, they should be expected to take off full flight and really do some damage in the country. Dan Mullen, 103-61 record, entering his 14th year. This is where they start their season. You got Idaho State make a statement. The week after that, you got Sam Houston State. You got two, cupcake type games, FCS schools. Get your lickings in. Put up some high numbers, look impressive, and set a rhythm because you do take on UCLA at home the week after. Perfect time. Perfect time to get going on the Dan Mullen era. Jaden Thomas, the ball's going to run through him. He's going to be their guy going into this season. He's, not only, veteran leadership on this offense, but he's going to be the guy, just to set a tone that they're the team to beat. I think the Rebels really feel that in this new era of NIL and transfer portal that they can be successful, not because just their university and the conference they're in, but the city they're in. Vegas. Everyone wants to come to Vegas, and that's going to help them out with recruiting, along with the plethora of boosters and donors that are willing to contribute to this program's success going forward. It's going to be interesting to see what we get from each quarterback. Anthony Calandra, obviously has more experience. Started 17 games at Virginia, and we're going to see how he can adapt to this new style of football, and what can Alex Orji do coming over from Michigan, where he saw very limited action, and can he possibly compete for the job and take it from Calandra, who's I think the front runner right now. And we're gonna find out early on who are gonna be the stars on this offense. They bring in a lot of guys over. They got Troy Omeire from Arizona State. They bring in Coy Moore from Western Kentucky, and he played at Auburn. You got JoJo Earl coming over from TCU, guys that saw limited minutes at their universities, but now they're ready to come to the Mountain West and put on a show. Defensively, senior middle linebacker Marcel McDuffie, he's going to be their guy on the defense, and expect him to lead this new unit to continue what they're doing last year. They had great defense last year, just a really balanced team overall. What can we expect? Brand new team. Dan Mullen's going to bring in that SEC mindset into Vegas, and optimism is high. I don't see many teams even beating UNLV this season. How far can they go? It's they can go high, but also you want to avoid disappointment. You really don't want to slip up against any of those teams in the conference, or even Idaho State. You don't want to make it close. You don't want it to look like you're struggling even to start the year. You just want to put on a show, be dominant, and get out of week 0 unscathed, and just get your fans excited for the 2025 season and the accomplishments and the highs that you'll see this year. So the game's 1 p.m. Pacific time. I'm looking at TV schedule. It's not going to be a national game. I'm thinking maybe a Mountain West Network game. This is Guess no one really wanted to bother with that. So TV, we do have the Mountain West Network. It's going to be on 103 kickoff time Pacific. Give the Rebels a peep. See what they do against Idaho State, taking on the Bengals.